Hi, my name is Jake Wiskershin. Thank you for choosing to watch this video. This is part one of a three-part series called At the Intersection of Guns and Mental Health. It's a cultural competence course designed to improve your understanding and awareness of the firearms culture in this nation. If you're a firearms person and you're checking this out just for curiosity's sake, we also go over a lot of counseling stuff too. So you can take that knowledge with you and integrate it into your lessons if you're a trainer, into your ranges and retail stores if you happen to operate or work for one of those, or just bring it home to your friends and family. We're trying to demystify what counseling is to get more people in, and we're trying to help other people understand what gun owners encounter and what they believe and what their activities are so that we can have more reasonable conversations and not be so off-putting perhaps when firearms owners present in the clinical setting. In many states, you'll find that this is good for continuing education credit, either in cultural competency or suicide prevention, or even in ethics. That's up to you how you decide that, and it's also up to you how you present it to your licensing board or your credentialing institution. We've had good luck getting this authorized in many other areas, but please try it. And if you don't get credit, hey, at least you get some really good knowledge out of it. Up first in our program is Mike Sedini. He's president and founder of Walk the Talk America. Mike.
Hi, thank you for taking our cultural competence course at the intersection of guns and mental health, part one. My name is Mike Sedini and I'm the founder of Walk the Talk America. But before we begin, I want to tell you our origin story. In 2009, the president of my company and a dear friend of mine took his own life with a firearm. And what I found was odd was at that time, the firearms industry didn't address negative outcomes of firearms due to the fact that they could be weaponized against us. So when we buried my friend, we basically kept on moving after that. You didn't see any articles, you didn't see any news reports within the industry of the tragedy that happened. I noticed this was a trend that every year during shows, we would lose the people that we hold near and dear to us, maybe one or two a year that would come by our booths at these shows to say hi, weren't there the next year. And it was the same story every time. The person is no longer with us because they took their life. For the next 9 years, this bothered me, and I always wanted to do something that would help the 2A community when it came to suicide prevention and better mental health. And that takes us to 2018, when I had a chance meeting with a complete stranger who asked one question that completely changed my life. My national sales manager and I were celebrating at a restaurant. We invited her to sit down with us, and she didn't know anything about firearms, but she asked one question, and that question was, what happens when there's a mass shooting? What happens to your industry? And I said, well, everybody blames us. We blame mental health, and then nothing ever happens. And then she said, well, if you know the problem is a mental health issue, how do you work with the mental health community to find solutions that you could both agree on? This question blew my mind and changed the course of my life because I made it my work to actually find solutions that would get people the help they need when they're in crisis without fear of consequence. So after that dinner, I became obsessed with the idea of what could we do to bring the two communities together to find solutions. And I went back to Vegas and I thought about it and I said, I need to find a mental health organization that's either gun neutral or pro-gun, and I didn't know if that even existed. So I did a bunch of research, and I was able to find a position paper by Mental Health America. It's position paper 72. And basically it said, this is going to be an unpopular opinion amongst our peers, but we're going to stay gun neutral because we don't believe that you should stigmatize somebody just because they battle a mental health issue. And I thought, these are the people I definitely need to talk to. So I reached out to many of my colleagues and peers in the firearms community. And I told them about this idea. And I remember I got so excited that I wrote Mental Health America a letter, an email. And I didn't send it first, but I remember the first person I talked to about the concept of Walk the Talk America was my good friend and Walk the Talk America board member, Rob Pincus. I sent it over to him and he read it and he said, this is great, but wait to send it. Wait till we have a website. Wait till we have the letter from the government that said you are good to go as a 501c3. And I remember I hung up the phone with Rob and probably waited 10 minutes and then hit send and sent this to Mental Health America. And what's amazing about this story is 2 weeks later, like to the day, when I got the call from my CFO at Eagle Imports, the company that I owned at the time that's in the firearms industry, and she said the letter came that okayed you for the 501c3, is the same day I got an email response from Mental Health America that said that they had been passing around my email and they wanted to talk to me. So I responded immediately to Mental Health America, and the first thing they asked me was, would you be willing to come out to LA to attend one of our conferences to discuss what you had talked about in the emails? So I took my CFO and we got on a plane and went there that weekend. And one of the things that I always find interesting is that when we arrived, the vice president of Mental Health America was out front creating these name badges. And we were there so early because we were nervous. And when I walked up, she was like, who are you and how can I help you? And I said, well, I'm the gun guy. And the first thing out of her mouth was, we are so glad you came. We didn't think you'd show up. And that's when it really hit me that I knew that this was something that we needed to really put a drive behind, because in the past, I think these types of conversations may have broken down somewhere. So that basically inspired me to just keep pushing harder to make this work. After that initial meeting with Mental Health America, I was fortunate enough to contact some of the most brilliant minds in suicide prevention and mental health. And sometimes, I guess, being naive and not understanding who you're talking to can work to your benefit. I compare it to calling Michael Jordan and asking him, how do you shoot free throws? People like Dr. Jeffrey Swanson, who listened to my whole spiel about what I wanted to do and basically pushed me from looking for the next mass shooter to suicide prevention. Because in the beginning of Walk the Talk America, I really thought we were going to be able to solve the mass shooting issue. But people like Dr. Jeffrey Swanson said, that's like finding a needle in a haystack. Really put your focus on suicide prevention, and you might be able to find that next mass shooter in that wide net you've casted. In the beginning, I had a lot of misconceptions about how we could solve some of these issues. And just like almost everybody in every walk of life, I thought maybe we could raise the money as the firearms industry and give it to the mental health community, and they can solve it with the programs that they have. And it was a really eye-opener the day that I found out that there are no programs. This has never been done before. So it was important for us to figure out something that made us unique as an organization, as opposed to people who just handed people a check. And I remember when I had to go back to my board and tell them that there's no programs that we can implement right away. It was one of the worst days of my life, but it turned out to be one of the best, because it forced us to look at ourselves and go, what makes us different than any other organization that is in this space? And I want to tell a story about my daughter. And I think it's important to understand why this transcends across any age group, any race, anything. I grew up in a family in New Jersey, Italian family. And back then you didn't talk about things like mental health. If I would have gone up to anyone in my family and said, I think I suffer from anxiety or depression, the answer would have been, I'll give you something to have anxiety about. But one day my 11-year-old daughter came into my office and she said, Dad, I think I suffer from anxiety. And I looked at the situation and said, okay, this is a very teachable moment. And I'd been working with Mental Health America, and I had said, go on their website and take one of their screenings. If you go on the Mental Health America website, they have like 12 different screenings, everything from depression, anxiety, substance abuse. They even have a couple screenings in Spanish. And I told her, go there, answer them honestly. Don't feel like somebody's judging you, and see what it says. It's going to tell you where you land on the spectrum for anxiety. So a couple days later, my daughter walks into the room, and she had gone and checked the mail. She hands it to me, and on her way out, she looked at me and she's like, oh, Dad, I forgot to tell you, I took the thingy. I was like, what thingy? She's like, the thingy. That's how she talked back then. She said, the thing for anxiety. I said, oh. I said, how did it go? And she said, well, turns out I only have mild anxiety. and she smiled. And that touched my heart because I saw the relief on her face. And on her way out, she actually turned and said, I'm going to give this to a couple of friends of mine in school because I think they could use it. And it got me thinking, well, maybe that's the first program for Walk the Talk America. Maybe I could get these screenings in the hands of gun owners just to get them thinking about their mental health. So I created this band. It's the Walk the Talk America Free and Anonymous Mental Health Screenings, WTTA.org/love. If you go there, you can land on a page that takes you to all those screenings that I just talked about. And we put it on this band and we took it to gun shows. We were passing it out. And it blew my mind the way people were stopping to talk about instances in their life or issues that they've had with loved ones that took their own life. It gave people an opportunity, a platform to talk about mental health and suicide. And I realized that that's what gun owners needed. They needed this outlet because for so many years, we wouldn't talk about these things in fear of losing our rights, which is a massive concern to almost every gun owner. But we'll get to more of that in a bit. But since the reception was so great about the wristbands at all the gun shows with all the gun owners, I thought, how do we take this to the next level? Like, what can we do to get it in the hands of every gun owner? So I thought, what if we put it on a flyer and I was able to put it in the boxes of the firearms for my firearm company? We had about 6 different firearm lines from all over the world. So I went to my manufacturers and I asked them if they would mind if I'd put that in the box. One of the reasons why I started with myself is because I was the guinea pig, the person who wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see if any organizations in the firearms industry would look at me sideways for what I was doing. I wanted to see what type of reaction we get from our customers. So we took the flyer and we started inserting it in our guns. And just to give you some perspective of how many guns we sold between 60 to 80,000 firearms a year. And we didn't have any law enforcement contracts. These were all civilian guns. But what was really cool about doing that is that we were able to get feedback from our customers, and it was all positive. We were getting these phone calls from customers like, hey, I just bought a Bursa, or I just bought a Grand Power, and I saw that you have this mental health screening in there, and I just wanted to thank you. So then I was like, okay, some time had passed. I could take this concept and go to a few of my peers in the industry. And I remember I went up to Arms Corps and I asked Martin Tuasan, who's the owner, hey, do you mind putting this flyer in the boxes of your guns? And he was like, well, what is it? I said, it's mental health screenings. He's like, that's a great idea. I'd totally do that. And I went to Charlie Brown at High Point and asked him, and I got the same response. And now that I look back on it, it's kind of funny because I thought like all we had to do is ask them to do it. And they said yes. That's how easy the yeses were. It goes to show you that the firearms industry is willing to try things or do things to promote better mental health and suicide prevention. We just had to figure out what it was. So we started to get requests for this card, not only from other firearms manufacturers, but from accessory companies. And then we would have gun shop owners asking if they could put them out on the counter. And then we also had firearms instructors asking if they could have the cards to give to their students that came to their class. So it became something where every aspect of the firearms industry was asking for these cards to get these screenings in the hands of their consumers, which I think is pretty cool. Once again, going back to there's a need for this, and people have wanted this for a long time. Throughout this video, you're going to see the scope of what Walk the Talk America does. One of the things I'm most proud of is the cultural shift within the firearms community to take mental health and suicide prevention seriously. You're seeing firearms instructors now incorporating the Walk the Talk America slides into their instruction, into their curriculum. And there used to be a time when firearms owners only talked about self-defense and liberty. Now you're getting self-defense, liberty, and mental health and suicide prevention plans. One of my most important goals in doing all this is I want to get the firearms industry where the alcohol industry got with DUIs. Nobody blames Johnny Walker when somebody gets behind the wheel and does something horrific. under the influence. And as the firearms industry, we can get there. We don't have to be compelled to do it by any government. We do it ourselves. Homegrown, root cause mitigation, getting people the help they need, getting upstream to prevent the unpredictable, and just have better mental health and suicide awareness as a whole. Now I want to introduce Jake Wiskerson, WTTA board member and owner of Zephyr Wellness, on what his contribution is to making Earth better.